Hi everybody, welcome to my Facebook Live. This is probably the second one that I've done. I'm Jo Huey and you're all very welcome to join me today. So today's topic is going to be around the root of all your problems, and I'm going to be sharing some really practical tips and also lots of experience that I've had firsthand. But first of all, I'd love to know who's here. So if you can just say hi in the comments, let me know that you can hear me and see me, and that would be fab. And then I will get started in a couple of minutes just to let everybody join. It's quite nerve-wracking doing all this when it's live. You might want to get a pen and paper as well, because there's going to be some things that you might want to make notes of. So take this time to go and get that, because you'll probably find it useful. I'm also going to be uploading this video onto YouTube. So if you haven't, if you're watching this on a replay, obviously that's fine. But if you prefer to watch on YouTube, then I'm going to put the video on there as well. So I don't know whether when you're in here you can actually see the comments, which is really frustrating. Okay, I don't know that I can see the comments that you're making. I just hope that you can see me. So let's get started. So at the root of all your problems, in my opinion, most of the time is stuff around your values and beliefs. And it's interesting that not many people actually focus on this and realise that this is important, and it really is. And I think that there's so many things that we take on from our childhood and what people say to us as we grow up, parents and teachers and friends, family, and it's not till we get older that we think actually we can make a decision as to whether or not those things that we've learned and been told are actually true for us, and whether we still want to believe what they said. So for me, I think the first thing to do is to clarify what a value is. So a value is a deeply held principle that kind of guide all of the choices that you make and the decisions you make and how you behave in your life. Also, it influences your emotions and your feelings, and it basically, they guide your life, how you live your life. They also motivate you and sort of drive you to achieving the things that you want to achieve, and kind of are a good explanation as to the reason that you do what you do. So, and then quickly I'd like to just explain what a belief is, just so you're clear on the difference between the two. So a belief is something that you believe to be true, and there are different areas that we apply this to. So that would be spirituality, your morals, social, intellectual, economics, and political. And so we might believe that it's appropriate to open, if it was a guy, opening the doors for ladies. That's a belief that they hold, to be true, and they live their life by it. We might believe that certain people with money are more, that are better than us, or that deserve to be treated in a different way, and so we would behave differently with them, and that's a belief that we've got. So there are a couple of different types of values. If we go back to values, there are a couple of different types. So one is outcome values, and this is something where we're working towards achieving something. Also things like success, happiness. We're kind of aiming to get these things. We want to be happy, we want to be successful in our lives, we want freedom, we want independence, we want some security, either that's financially or in other ways. So that's kind of outcome based. And then we've got values that we use in our daily life. So things like honesty, integrity, love, fairness. And so they're the kind of two different types. One's more driven in terms of achieving an outcome, and the other is just ones that you live your life by every day. So one thing I want to make clear is that your values and beliefs can change and do change. So, you know, what you believed 10 years ago may not be true for you today. So those beliefs and values will change over a period of time. Also, I think sometimes your values and beliefs differ depending on the context. So you might have different values at work than you will at home and in your social situations. So they're not necessarily going to be, there's probably a common thread, but there'll be slightly different things depending on which area you're looking at in your life. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is where your values come from. And I was explaining this to a couple of people recently, and the way I described it was that if we think about ourselves as a whole being, 100%, we're made up of, let's say, 2, 3, 4, 5% of who we truly really are. That innocent child that we were many, many years ago, that's, you know, a part of who we are. And then what happens is, over a period of time, we get influenced by the people in our lives. So our parents, our teachers, colleagues, people we socialise with, whoever it might be, as we grow up, friends, parents, whoever it might be. And we can take on those values and beliefs of these other people that are in our lives. And obviously we're influenced by things in our social environment and culturally and things like that. And then what happens is, as we grow up and we go through life, we are reacting and feeling in a way which links to how that person was, or the person we've learnt these things from. So if our parents told us that people with money are better than us, then we go through our lives treating those people differently because that's what we've been taught. That's what we've learnt from our parents. Now, often people don't question that. They just carry on their lives because that's all they know and that's all they've ever done. But sometimes we can say to ourselves, actually, do I still want to believe this? Do I want to believe that about people? Or do I want to change my mind or make my own mind up? Now, I think for daughters of alcoholics, it's really difficult because sometimes your self-esteem is so knocked and your confidence is so low that you have lost all sense of identity. So finding your understanding what's important to you and your beliefs and your values is really difficult because you've never had to focus on yourself. You've always focused on everybody else. And so today I want to share this practical exercise which is going to help you to understand how to work out what your values are and what's important to you. And it's probably going to take some practice because you're not necessarily going to know that straight away if you haven't actually sat down and thought about it. And I've got some tips and ways in which to help you do that. So we're made up of kind of all of the things that we've heard and experienced and all of that. And so it's important for us to try and get to that little 5% of who we really are, tap into that and find out what that part of us wants and believes or wants to believe. And then we can work on changing that so that we no longer live our lives by the fact we might believe that we're unworthy, that we are not valued by people or we're not loved by people. And that's something that we might have carried on again through our childhood. Maybe we've heard really negative comments, and that has, if it's happened to you over a long period of time and on a repetitive basis, it gets really ingrained. But how I always explain this to people is that the people that say mean things to us and that say things that aren't helpful, healthy, supportive, loving, is because they're coming from their own set their own map of the world, for want of a better word, their own experiences and values and beliefs. And the trouble is they then pass those unhealthy ones on to us, which then doesn't help us. And so the story like replicates. And obviously that's not what we want. We want to be able to recognise what's somebody else's stuff and what's ours. But when we're children, we can't do that. And we don't have that ability sometimes. And so I think that it's not that those people are necessarily doing those things on purpose, because it's what they've learned from their parents or whatever. But that still doesn't take away the impact that it has on your life. So, you know, it's not about blame or anything like that. We all have to take accountability for ourselves. And I think it's important, you know, to do that. We're responsible and we're accountable to ourselves. But we, you know, there's some explanation in terms of why we may be behaving the way we are. So it's really just about questioning things and making sure that we're not compromising ourselves a lot of the time. And I see this quite a bit in people that kind of don't really know themselves, and daughters of alcoholics are very much like this. As I say, because they aren't used to looking after themselves, they tend to really not know how to do that. So I think hopefully this video is going to help people in terms of starting to put themselves first and to realise actually it's okay to think about what's important to you. So that's kind of some of the areas of where your values come from. So friends, families, also religion, school, economics, media as well. Obviously in today's society the media has a massive part to play in terms of how we perceive ourselves and comparing ourselves to other people and things like that, which we know is not factual, but we still again live our life by what we see on social media. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because then does that lead us back to the whole thing that we're believing what other people say when we get to, you know, when we're an adult, we're trusting more of what we see and hear from other people that we don't actually know. We don't know these people on social media. We don't know anything about them. Yet we could see somebody look fantastic in a nice plush house or whatever, but we don't know how real that is. And yet then we could take that information and then try and do the same. And that could be used as a motivator and it could be a good thing. But often we see that it's not, and people can then feel less than, and they feel they're not measuring up, and all based on something they've seen on the internet that may or may not be fact or real. So it's mind-blowing to me, and we all do it. I do it too. But I think that if we can just be more mindful of the fact that this stuff goes on, then that's a good start. So, hang on. Really need a drink. So how do your values help you? Your values help you in terms of feeling fulfilled, make you feel happy. If you have got to a point where you know what your values are, then they will hopefully make you feel happy. They'll make you feel successful in whatever success looks like to you. They will make a difference to your emotional state, your mental health and your physical well-being, as well as your spiritual well-being. They also, this next one's interesting because it made me think of my mum, and they help you make decisions quicker and make better decisions. And I know there's quite a lot of people sometimes that find it really hard to respond on the spot and to know what decision to make. And often that's just because they're not really in tune with their values and what's their core beliefs and what's important to them. So I thought of my mum when I saw that. Also, it increases motivation. And for me, there's a lot better communication when you know what your values are. Because if you think about it, how can you say to somebody what's important to you and what you believe if you don't actually know what that is? You can obviously, you can guess on a certain level, and you know whether or not you like somebody to do this or that, or to talk to you in a certain way. But sometimes when you're in a relationship, for example, and you don't know why there's a conflict going on, often it's because your values are in conflict. So, for example, one person could really love to receive gifts and presents and things like that, and the other person wants hugs and kisses and more affection. And so it's kind of like a mismatch. So then it causes what's known as a values conflict. So you know, each of those people have got a different value. And so when you've got different values, you clash. And that's not to say that you can't find a middle ground. You can. But if you don't recognise that's what's going on, it can cause arguments and things can escalate. And sometimes, you know, depending on the severity or importance of the value, relationships break down because of it. Because your values are so opposite that it's difficult for the relationship to survive. So that was something that came up when I spoke to a friend, and she was talking about money and things like not being important to her, but it was to her partner. And it caused real conflict in their relationships. And so, again, it's important that you know what your values are, because if you are looking to get into a new relationship, and that could be a new friendship, that you know when you get into that, that the person that you're getting into a relationship with, or a friendship, or whatever it might be, a work relationship, you know that you're got the same values. And that would be true if you went in and looking for a job and were going into a workspace. You want to make sure that the company that you work for have got similar values to you, because if you're very, if one of your values is freedom and flexibility and things like that, and it's a company that's very, you know, inflexible, that's going to cause a nightmare for you. So, but again, unless you know those things that are important to you, you'll go into those jobs and you'll keep leaving because those values are a mismatch and they're not working for you, because you haven't identified them, and you maybe haven't identified what the values are of the workplace to make sure that they're going to match. And obviously you're never going to get it 100%. There's always going to be things where your values are different to somebody else's, but it depends on how important those things are in that relationship or in that work relationship or whatever. So hopefully that makes sense. The values conflict thing is really important. So the title of this live is The Root of All Your Problems. So for me, I think that when we have like different issues in our lives, often it is because of these beliefs and these values. And if we are struggling with our weight, for example, or stopping smoking, or an addiction or something like that, ultimately the people I've worked with that have addictions are people that have extremely low self-worth. They have very little confidence and self-esteem. And so those beliefs are basically driving their behaviour, which is what I spoke about earlier. So because they, in the most part, you know, if they've experienced trauma and they've experienced these negative things, which often they have, then the beliefs and values are ultimately at the root of their addiction issues. Obviously, when you're a drinker, you're also physically addicted. However, underneath the alcohol, because alcohol's not the problem, it's a solution, underneath all of that is this void. It's the same with food. There's a void and we're trying to fill it, an emotional void. And so underneath that, if we really dig down, is our beliefs, what we believe about ourselves. Do we believe that we're worthy of love? Do we believe that we're you know, a valuable person to society, in this relationship, at work, or whatever it might be? And so if you look at lots of different scenarios in life, often the problem will come down to either a values conflict or what your beliefs are. So what I wanted to do is show you this little exercise, which I learned when I did an NLP course, which is neuro-linguistic programming, for those of you that haven't heard of it. And this exercise was one that I found really interesting, but really challenging. And so I'm going to do some links afterwards so that you'll be able to have a look at the exercise. So I'm going to talk it through with you, but you can have a look at the exercise. And also in the exercise, I've given you some examples of what values are, just to kind of help you out, because sometimes you think, oh, I don't know what my values are. So some of the examples are in the exercise, but I have done my own. This is like exciting, doing one I prepared earlier. So here, I did check earlier to make sure these wouldn't look like they're back to front. So hang on, there we go. So these are some of the personal values that I've written down. So in the exercise, it's going to ask you to list 10 of your values. Now, what I need to make clear is you can do this for all different areas of your life. So like I say, at work, in your social life, relationships, and so on. So this is just my general personal values. So I have made a list of 10 that go all the way down to the bottom. Okay. And one of the things people don't often like to put is stuff like money, because money is important, and things like sex and stuff like that. It's all very important, you know, and, you know, not forgetting our, this is weird, our health. So what the exercise will talk through is make a list of 10 values that are important to you in your life. So I've obviously put things like freedom, respect, reliability, health, money, connection, friends and family, trust, effort, and intimacy and sex. So they're my personal values. And these have definitely changed over the years. So like I said earlier, yours will too. Now, the purpose of the exercise is to start prioritising which are your top values. So they say when you do the one for relationships, you usually will only find your top 5. You won't get all 10. So the idea is to put these in some sort of order. So which is going to be number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Okay. So for me, friends and family. My sister's on this, I think, so she'll be pleased to say I'm putting her at the top. So I'd say my friends and family are up there. That's really important to me. That would be number 1. What else? Do you know what? I think freedom for me is definitely a big one. And I think for me as the daughter of an alcoholic, I value freedom because I felt that I didn't have any. And a lot of us do feel out of control and that we don't have any power. So freedom makes sense to me because it's the total opposite of what I had. So we work through this list, putting it in like a hierarchy. So what's the most important to us? And then once we've got this in some sort of order, what we want to do is to, just trying to think of the best way to describe it, is it's kind of like challenging and kind of double checking what you've put on here. So I'm going to put connection is next, and then respect. Health is pretty important as well. Okay, so I'm only going to do the top 5. Hopefully you can all see that. Oops, there we go. Okay, so what we have to do next is say, if I could have friends and family, but I couldn't have freedom, would that be okay? I've done this exercise many times. It's hard, but it's like that for a reason, because it's trying to get you to really think about what's important to you. And I think at the moment with the coronavirus and everything, that is kind of going to make people start to think about what's important to them and what isn't. And the things that we might have thought were important, like material possessions and stuff like that, are actually not very important at all. So for me, the answer to this would be, if I could have friends and family, but I couldn't have freedom, would that be okay? Yes, it would be. So that stays where it is because that's, you know, important. So if I could have freedom, but I couldn't have connection, would that be okay? This is really difficult because they're both important to me. Yeah, I think I'd stick with freedom where it is, to be honest with you. So, if I could have connection, but I couldn't have respect, would that be okay with me? I don't think it is. I think I need respect first, so I have to change them around. So the fact that I thought that that was the priority, it looks like it actually isn't. So then I'm moving it around. Okay, and then you basically are starting to work down the list to get it into your like final hierarchy, so that you know that this is actually your top values. And then the whole point of this is that you know that when you're living your life, hopefully you're living your life by these things, and these things need to be in all, you know, present in all your decisions that you make. Whether you choose to, I don't know, if you were to buy a house, for example, and it was nowhere near your family and you weren't likely to have much freedom, then it's probably not going to work for you. And sometimes in our mind we can be very logical and give good reason why we should buy this particular house, because it's beautiful and it's really impressive from the curb or whatever. But ultimately, if it's going to be in total conflict with what you've put down here that are your values, it's not going to work like long term, because this is what is important to you. But if you buy a house and you haven't done this sort of thing, then issues might crop up because you're going to start missing your friends and family and your freedom, and it's going to potentially make you a bit more unhappy. It's not to say that you couldn't still enjoy living in that house, for example, but it may bring up these extra challenges. So it's important for us, I think, to know that if we know what our values are, then we're going to make better decisions, and we're going to be able to make those decisions quicker because we know what's important to us. I think the health one might come up at the moment just because of everything that's going on. I think it's made me think about my health and how lucky I am to have my health, and so I think that that's probably going to end up coming further up here. But it is really difficult because all of these things are important, but it's whether what are the top sort of 5 that, you know, are going to really be important to you in your life. There's no point in having a job which is going to take you away from your friends and family. So if you're considering a job change or something like that, it's not likely to work for you if you're going to be 300 miles away from your friends and family, if that was one of your values. So I think it's really helps us to make decisions that are going to work for us rather than against us. And with regards to your beliefs, again, I do really believe that this is something that affects us all hugely. And when we so believe that voice in our head, which, even though the voice that we hear may be telling us that we're not good enough, or we don't have enough, or we're not getting out of the house enough, or whatever it might be, that voice doesn't help us at all. And because it's in our head, we think it's true because it's coming from us, so it must be true. But it isn't fact at all. And our thoughts are the most powerful things. And every time we listen to those thoughts, it just keeps chipping away at how we feel about ourselves, especially if it's negative. So if you're thinking unhelpful things, all it's doing is chipping away all the time at how you feel about yourself, or any anxiety that you might have, or any depression that you might have. It's just going to make it worse. And the only person that can change that is you. And I'm not saying that's easy. And when people say that, it's like, yeah, if only it was that easy. And I get that. But no one can make you change how you think unless you are ready and willing to start changing how you think through things like therapy or self-development and things like that. If you keep listening to that voice inside your head that is telling you negative stuff, then it's going to make you feel worse about yourself. And at the moment, with the coronavirus going on, it's so easy to listen to the media and everything else that's going on, people's opinions, stories, conspiracy theories, and they're all stories, and a lot of them are probably not very factual. And even some of the stuff from the government we don't really know is true, 100% true. But if you are struggling at the moment, if you are going to listen to anything, listen to official resources like the governments or the NHS. They're going to give you the most accurate advice as much as we're allowed to know. So, and then make a decision to turn off or ignore any other stuff, because ultimately the test is, does it make you feel any better? And if the answer to that is no, well, stop listening to it, stop watching it, ask people to stop sending you stuff about it. That's your decision, and you are responsible for yourself and accountable to yourself. So you can't blame anybody else. So that is one way of managing what information is coming into you. I think it's important that we don't overwhelm ourselves at the moment as well, because one of the difficulties certainly daughters of alcoholics will have, some of us, is this lack of control. There is no controlling this thing as far as we are as an individual. There's certain things we can do in order to keep ourselves well and safe, like isolating ourselves and things like that. But we can't control the outcome. And I know that's really hard if you are, like me, a bit of a control freak. Not a bit of, I am. I admit it. It's a bit of an oxymoron, isn't it? A bit of a control freak. Anyway, so if you are a control freak, then this is going to be a really difficult time, because there's lots of unknowns, lots of uncertainty. And even though logically you know all of this stuff, it's really hard to let go of it, isn't it? And you are desperately trying to find some way of bringing some sense of control. And the only thing you can control is yourself and how you respond to it. So ultimately at the moment, for a lot of people, the root of their problems is that they're paying way too much attention to what's going on in the news, and it's making them feel worse.